Now I will say just a few words by way of conclusion. I think from the discussion that we have had so far, it is clear that there is a strong case for the RTE Forum to represent to the ministry and the government at the appropriate level our points of views on the subject. The views that we had expressed during the course of the pandemic, during the course of the consultations on the budget, and which have been expressed now. I think somebody, I hope Mr. Ambarish, somebody can assist you in putting this together quickly, and so that you can present it at the appropriate level. If necessary, even in the form of a letter to the finance minister or to the prime minister. So this is one thing that I would like to mention. It is too important a subject to be left in the lurch. And we owe it to our avowed purpose for which we are working, and to the children of India to do that. It is as important and serious as that. The second thing is that I entirely agree with three major points made by Professor Jha. And one of them is that it seems from this budget that the government has very little concern with education. All that it is concerned with is the creation of a special capacity with government's help, which can subsequently be transferred to the private sector. And even in the field of education, what meager has been presented is a part of the process of handing over the national economy and the national assets to the private sector. And that too to the private sector of a particular ilk and kind. I mean, for example, this whole 15,000 exemplary schools. Now, there's a long story of this kind of initiative. I mean, even when I was doing the work on the Bihar Common School System Commission, I had a note from the Chief Minister's office saying that please give your views independently on the desirability of opening such schools. Because every government, either state or central government, want to do it. It is a very easy path to tread. It is a very easy temptation to mislead. I mean, even though these schools may constitute 1 or 2% of the total number of schools required for universal education, it sounds very attractive, and particularly for the middle class who can send their children to such schools either by way of their capacity to pay or by way of by merit. Because I mean, if you get educated, it begets merit. But if those who are kept out of the domain of education altogether, merit gets lost. It is a kind of a huge meritocide, if one may use this word, on a scale which has been unseen in the past. What we are committing in India, we are committing meritocide. The killing of the merits of millions and millions of children of the underprivileged and poor families. This is what we are doing in India. We have seen how with slight incentives, these children can go to the top. And this is how we are dealing with their destiny. So this is what they intend to do, and it is not only in the field of education, but in other parts also. When Mr. Manmohan Singh, the first speech that he delivered from the ramparts of the Red Fort was to create one model school for each district. In that speech he mentioned, and not a single such school was created during the 10-year period of the rule of the UPA. And I kept myself in touch with the negotiation that is going on with the private sector for creating such schools in that sector, in the PP model. And the kind of demand that the private sector had made in these negotiations in the Planning Commission, I mean, that amounted to transfer of government funds to the private sector on a scale on which the government could have established 50 to 60 times many more schools in the public sector than the number of schools that were being discussed at the PP model. This is the kind of demand that it made. And even that government could not concede to that demand. And the entire negotiation fell through, and nothing happened. So this is what we see, this 50,000 exemplar school, and it has got behind it political agenda, which has been emphasized both by Professor Govinda and Professor Jha, that the Sainik school increase. Now, Professor Govinda studied in the discussion of the general budget. He said that the idea was that you train the children in these schools in the Sainik discipline also, and the commitment that the Sainiks should have to the constitution and patriotism, so that at least some of them can join the army. Well, my understanding was that, like in other spheres, the argument was that the children, parents are far away in the field. It is difficult to get admission to a reasonably good school. So if they had schools of their own, at least some part of their education needs could be met. But the point is that I know. I mean, that is to show that by establishing a few more, we can appeal to the false chauvinistic patriotic feelings of a section of population, but we can't solve even 0.001% of the problem of access and quality in school education. This is a reality which nobody is prepared to accept and bring it out in the open. And these are the only proposals that are there in this thing. So I think that create additional capacity in the social and other fields with the government assistance, government expenditure, so that they can replace the public, what exists in the public system, which are being destroyed, and they can be quickly handed over to the private sector. This is essentially the strategy, a part of the overall development strategy. Now, the third thing is that in this context, the whole NEP is, to use a term very frequently used by Mr. Chidambaram, with whom I don't agree on several other points, but and that is not a word from his language. but he uses it very frequently in his articles, and there is jumlebazi. So this business of entire new education policy is nothing but jumlebazi, has become obvious from the kind of provision that we have, or non-provision, or negative provision on education that we have in the current budget. So now, in these circumstances, what do we do? I mean, I've already suggested that we should represent to the government, and which I think that Mr. Ambarish will do, and I will help him in whatever manner I can. But I would just discuss in 2 minutes the other alternatives in this field, because the situation is quite desperate.
Yes, sir.
One is that the entire mainstream economist, and mainstream I mean the economists who speak for the opposition these days, Mr. Chidambaram, Mr. Manmohan Singh, Ranjan, who writes frequently and was very close to Mr. Manmohan Singh. You have the economists who virtually write on behalf of the capital class in their columns, and you can identify them. I don't have to mention to them, they're very obvious. If they think of expenditure to create demand and outside providing incentive to the policy, think of policies for enhancing private investment. If outside they think of anything, there is only infrastructure. And by infrastructure, by some strange logic, they mean only physical infrastructure. And they don't mean social infrastructure, as Dr. Praveen has pointed out. And the multiplier factor for investment in social infrastructure, for creating demand in the economy as a whole, for laying the foundations of future growth, is many times more than in any other sector. It has been recognized by UNESCO, was recognized almost 15-20 years in a very small booklet that they had published at that time on the importance of education for the economy as a whole. That was not exactly the title, but that was something of that nature. But we don't recognize them. Our economists don't recognize them. Our economists still feel, or this class of the economists, I'm so glad that Dr. Praveen had put emphasis on social infrastructure. They do not bring in, they deride it by saying that this is a giveaway, a waste of resources. And we have not found economists of repute, of credibility, who can systematically write countering this point of view and disseminating the other point of view. And a person like me, who had only done economics in college days, but strayed into field of diplomacy, had to do it last year in my paper on that. And I think that some very good educationalists assembled to discuss that paper. But this has been forgotten. This has not created any impact in the mainstream of the community of people who work in economics and write in economics. The other thing is that we have lobbies. And the problem with the lobby is that among the people who are affected, it is difficult to create a lobby. Children cannot have lobby of their own.
Yeah, sir. Sir, taking the suggestion you made that we should write a letter to Finance Minister and we can collect the signatures from eminent persons from different walk of life to oppose the cut they have made in education alone.
That should be done. That should be done.
Yes.
That should be done in any case.
And we need to write that letter to address to opposition parties also and parliamentarians, because it will be discussed at the floor of parliament. So parliamentarians can do something if they wish.
No, we can do that. No, I was saying that this Sukanya was talking about one of our strong lobbies being the states which are in the lower rung of development.
Yeah.
But you see, on the farmers' movement, one of the states at the lowest level of development, that is Bihar, the kind of stand they have taken. And they are going even further than the central government in suppressing expression of opinion which goes against the government.
Yeah.
So there is also nothing but frustration.
Yes.
So till recently we were thinking each time I used to speak in the review of our annual conference was knocking the door of the judiciary. But we have seen the orientation in the attitude of the judiciary which has come about or has been brought about in the last few years. And how that is also kind of dashing against a wall on which is very difficult to make a dent. So only alternative seems to be to mount a mass movement. But we are seeing the example of the fate of a huge mass movement that is going on today. And really a daring thing to do if somebody can attempt to kind of take similar initiative in the education field. So I think that with this word I would like to conclude. It is not a very positive note, but all that we can say is that we will continue with our efforts in this field. Thank you very much.